Hello, welcome to our 14th meetup. For everybody who is watching this later, we are now going to walk through some issues to see if we can resolve them. All
All
right.
right. Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I have not committed anything. Oh, sharing's not turned on. I sent a request.
Yeah,
Maybe you're allowed to.
yeah, you should be able to do it now.
Okay, try it again. Okay. Ooh, hello, Mac. Ooh. Okay, there's no. Okay, this one. Okay, this looks good. Oh, I need to grant more privacy privilege to Zoom first. Oh, I might have to rejoin the Zoom call to be allowed to share it. Let me try.
Go on Mac, new Mac. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably. Yeah, Zoom says that you are sharing. Yeah, there it is.
it looks good, right? Okay.
I'll put you on the left side, bigger screen.
All right. So I tried to boil it down to few files, and in order to have a spec that's really precise, I moved some parts to separate documents. So we have like design decisions document, I think, which I presented last time already.
Yeah.
And I just improved it slightly. And I think we should keep it that way to keep the design decisions and discussions out of the main spec and maybe follow more rigorously the architecture decision record structure. I haven't done that yet. Then we also have a document listing the goals which we also stated already. And we have sort of a requirements list which we can distill. And all that is left out of the spec, which is supposed to be very dry and concise. So I try to look into how W3C is writing all these specs. And there is something called Markdown to Spec. And you just write Markdown, then you can add additional metadata files called bike shed with a nice file extensions BS. And then you can convert it into the respec format, which is really an HTML file with a respec CSS and the respec JavaScript, which then allows folding of the sidebar, stuff like that. So all in all, the first step of the whole way would be this document to just have a markdown document actually stating the actual contents of the spec. So this is something we can evolve into a very nice looking spec later on. Yeah, manually copied the structure of such a spec, which is always listing which version I'm actually looking at. And I decided that we are currently looking at version 2 and the stuff, or 0.2, and the stuff we have already in the existing pull request, I consider this to be 0.1, just to be able to distinguish the two things. So this is 0.2.
Yeah, that's very wise. That's wise.
Just, yeah. And then these are the usual things to have a feedback editor. This is not the people doing the spec, it's just the guys actually typing the spec. So this currently is just me, but as this is just marked down, I think we can easily have more people writing on the actual spec.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a very short abstract. The status of the document needs to be clarified that this is not official published in any way. Then we need some kind of license to let other people know what can they do with the license. For the moment, I settled on the CC by SA. That means everybody can use this spec as they want if they give credit to the original authors, so cite the Open Canvas Working Group. If they change the spec, they must say how they changed it. This probably helps to avoid confusion. And they may use the spec commercially. Otherwise, it would be prohibitive for all these tool vendors. We can change this, but this, yeah, at a first glance seems to be the best fitting license.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. But
So yeah, we always need a current state and then we can change it.
yeah.
Then I have some conventions in the document. I found out that in the final spec, we will not have to-do lists. And I drafted a CSS snippet so that these markdown with a to-do item in it look really scary, like an issue, so that it's easy to add issues to the document and not overlook them. So this is actually quite nice. You just have this to-do item and it will render it as an issue. Then for the types, the JSON types which are defined are really brittle. I mean, they don't say much about the actual contents, and we define our own types or reuse other types. So I think it's wise to have a catalog of OCIF types. This directly brings us to the next question. What is this spec called? I think it's the Open Canvas interchange format. There are the words exchange and interchange. And interchange is more between different applications. And exchange would be more over the network, but more between similar applications. So interchange seemed to be more fitting. So then OCIF would be the acronym of the spec.
Sounds good. Does that already exist, by the way? Did you check if OCIF already?
Whether that is something already? No, I didn't.
I don't know. Just wondering.
Well, there is the Orange Corners Innovation Fund. OCIF. But I think it's okay. They are actually
sounds
like
good.
It can also be the outbound call interface function. Okay, then we have a table of contents. And here we go. Dum, 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 dum. And soon we will encounter our first issues. So, yeah, what is a canvas? There is no definition or whatsoever what a canvas actually is. So we link to infinitecanvas.tools where like 100 tools are listed, and there's even one post I found about Open Canvas, but even Wikipedia is not mentioning this concept we are using at all. So this is maybe something we should add to Wikipedia actually.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I think that's a very good idea. Because ChatGPT now has this canvas option, which is not an infinite canvas. I don't know why you choose that name. Maybe they have plans for it, but
yeah, true.
It's good to write something on Wikipedia about it.
From the game engine perspective, what comes to mind as close is that this is like the 2D equivalent or the text and relation equivalent of like a 3D model. So it's just a file that contains this data that exists in 2 dimensions. And specifically with canvases, we have these relations and such.
But we even opted for as well, so it's not strictly 2D.
Yes, the Z index is good for rendering. It's still broadly 2 dimensional though, even with the Z index, because you have like you can't rotate into the 3rd dimension, you know? Doesn't have a size in the 3rd dimension.
Well, we discussed it. Maybe it has. Maybe we should also remove it. But I remember in earlier discussions in the current spec, we actually have a real true Z coordinate. And a Z dimension for the size is also legal currently.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a good idea, but we'll come to that. So, yeah.
All I can say for
Okay.
sure is that such information would be discarded if I imported a canvas into Godot engine.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's actually something I need to take a note. It should not be discarded, but also cannot be not discarded, right? Yeah. Okay, 2D versus 3D. We'll come back to that. So in the spec, we mainly talk about nodes, relations, and assets, and schemas. Should we maybe consistently call them resources here too? Yeah. Okay, nodes, relations, resources, and schemas. Then we have the overall file structure. The current spec says we have an attribute called schema_version, and I would propose to rename it just to OCIF. And at the value, list the URI of the schema in use. This way, it's shorter and it serves sort of like a magic signature. If you have just a random JSON object somewhere and you find it has a root level attribute called OCIF, then maybe what you're looking at is some kind of open canvas file. So,
I like
there's
that.
also
In fact, that's actually better than what GLTF does, because GLTF file just has asset version 2. It doesn't even say like inside of the JSON data that it is a GLTF. It just says that it's version 2.
okay. So yeah, so this so we have one vote more for this.
Yeah, I like it as well. This, yeah, it really gives a separation also from other JSON formats.
Okay.
So you have no confusion there.
Great. So I counted 3 votes for this. Okay, excellent. So the minimal, yeah, then the next question, nodes, relations, resources, and schemas. They are all, actually, this must be an array. They are all arrays. Are they required or optional? As they can be empty anyway, why not have them optional?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it should be required to specify them if they're going to be empty.
Yeah, what about the nodes? Don't you always have nodes?
Not necessarily, if you just have relations.
For a point of
It's okay.
comparison, you can have a GLTF without nodes. It's valid.
So I keep them optional, fine. We can always change it later, just to have like a
Yeah.
working consensus. So then the minimal OCIF file actually is really just this snippet.
Yeah. Oh, that makes it
Not-
that makes it quite easy. Makes it very clear. It's a plus, I think.
And then we have a minimal useful OCIF file, which has a node. It must have an ID, it has a position, and there it is. Okay, now let's talk about nodes.
Nice.
So nodes have an ID, which must be unique for all nodes, relations, and resources, I would say, yeah. Then I have a position, and here we had either a 2D position or a 3D position. And we haven't defined any defaults. We could also say that the z-axis defaults to 0. We could also drop the 3D part to make it clearer. Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Hey guys.
Yeah, well, I think this is fine to either
Okay.
X and Y or X, Y, and Z.
Okay. Then we have size. A position. I already have some questions about position. So it's the position of the node of the canvas, but which part of the node is actually positioned? Is it like the center? Is it the bottom left? What is positioned?
Most UI tools use the top left corner, actually.
Okay. So maybe we start with that as well.
I think I have, I'll pull up the spreadsheet. I think we actually did an analysis of all the different whiteboard tools and what they regard as position. Let me see if I can find that spreadsheet that Orion put together for that.
Okay,
But
more
yeah.
questions about position. The coordinate system. Do we agree that the coordinate system is left-handed and x-axis is going right, y-axis is going down, and z-axis is into the screen? This is what CSS uses.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
From
plus X
CSS
goes to the
perspective.
right, Y goes down, and Z goes into the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems to be
Okay.
what most of the things use.
Then the unit. We talk about.
That's interesting. You say that Z goes into the screen because most tools I've seen actually have the Z coming out of the screen.
Oh,
Yeah, CSS has Z coming out of the screen too, right?
Yeah, and it's also that's also how
oh,
it works in OpenGL and Vulkan.
Yeah.
Z comes out of the
yeah.
screen.
Yep.
But by contrast, DirectX has Z going into the screen.
Of
And
course,
by
Microsoft
the
has to do
way,
something.
the entire reason that exists is because Microsoft wanted it to be different on purpose to have vendor lock-in.
Yeah, yeah, to have it be incompatible with OpenGL, which
Nice.
they were competing with at the time. Um,
So
yeah, but yeah, Z, I think we should follow CSS where Z comes out of the
yes,
screen.
pointing away from the screen. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So, okay. Origin is top left. Yes. The
Mhm.
unit. Unit is pixels, but what is a pixel? Nowadays we have subpixel rendering and so on, so we talk about the logical pixels as CSS does, right?
Mhm.
And then whatever the device is actually doing to display a pixel, how many pixels it uses for that, we don't care. It's logical pixels.
Yep.
Okay. The
Agreed.
position point is top left corner, and Jess is looking in the big sheet, whether that's a
Unfortunately,
good
the sheet
choice.
doesn't have that particular
Okay.
detail, but yeah, I think top left is fine.
And what about the transform origin as CSS has? Do you want something like that?
Seems like Aaron had something to say about transform origins in GLTF. I'm trying to remember what that was. I think it's in the GitHub discussion.
I try to
We will
remember
also
which thing specifically you're referring to that I would say.
Let me see.
we'll come to that when we talk about rotation. Uh,
Got it.
okay, so this is all about position. That's fine. Then size. Size is also per dimension. So it's width, height, and depth, and rather easy to understand. Then rotation, we agreed to have it in degrees, to have it optional.
Mhm.
And what actually is rotated? I mean, what is the point of rotation?
It would be the same point as is the position. That's what would make sense to me at least, and that's how it works in all 3D tools
Okay.
and in game engines.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Defined. Um, then properties. I propose to rename properties to data.
Mm. Mhm.
Shorter, easier to type, and makes clear that you cannot just have one level properties, but actual JSON trees behind it.
Mhm. Fine with me.
Yeah.
Motion passed.
Okay. I have that.
Very
Yeah, the
structured,
position.
Max.
Hmm?
Very structured how you work.
Yeah. Otherwise, I get completely lost.
Yeah.
Position. We could have a default position and make position optional to allow other tools to import stuff more easily into an OCAV file. Just drop everything on the canvas. Everything's just on top of each other. And then the user can arrange it. Otherwise, you would have, yeah, you could just write 0, 0 to your elements manually when you import.
Agreed.
So
Yeah, this is part of supporting non canvases that are logical canvases that don't actually support any kind of positioning. It's like at least you could get all the elements in, and then it would be on the user to, to drag them out of origin. But yeah,
so we
there'd
make
be
it optional,
yes, although it's
and
strongly
then
encouraged. In most cases, it's going to be included, right? Um,
so the default then would be 0, 0.
mhm. Yeah. I think this is one of the things that sets this apart from other standards is we're trying to include things that are purely logical in
Yeah.
nature.
All right. And then we have resource, a resource to display.
Mhm.
And we refer to it by ID. If it's optional, then what actually is displayed at all?
Gosh. Okay, so remind me how resources work. With IDs, we're gonna have a resources array, right?
Yes,
Of
we can look
items.
and
Yeah.
we can look at the resources
I would like to
here.
point out that it actually makes sense to not require something to be displayed at a given node. For the key thing about a node is that it gives you the transform. So if you need to just have a transform around the canvas for some use case,
Ah,
then you could just have an empty node.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you
interesting.
like maybe nesting another set of objects inside of it or something like that.
Right, it could be that. It could be like that's probably the most abundant use case of empty nodes. Yeah, there's also like you could have some system that allows like copying or like taking
Mhm.
a given visual object and moving it around to a set of predefined places, and that would just like copy the transforms of these nodes to itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I guess the resource is optional. Plus, like one thing we had talked about including in the base layer is some sort of fallback string, like the ability
Um,
to define to just describe the node in plain text that could be
yeah, I have a,
displayed when you don't support it. And I don't remember where, now that we've separated resource from node, I don't know where that fallback lives.
I'll show you. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
it
Great,
lives.
great,
It
great. It
lives.
lives on. Hurrah.
Would it make
Um,
sense for
uh,
the resource to be able to like describe in inside of itself what is the fallback, or maybe even point to
yeah,
another resource as the fallback?
y- yeah, that's sort of what I'll show you in a minute.
Cool.
Scale was something that confused me. Why do we need scale at all if we can just change the size? Um, and if we have a scale, should scale not be something in 3 dimensions? Or yeah, maybe Aaron, you have some strong ideas what scale is actually useful for?
Yeah, so out of all the degrees of freedom here, scale, like compared to like a 3D game engine, scale is the only one that's missing. And what scale would allow you to do is imagine like you have a sticky note with some text, and then you zoom in on that sticky note, and there's another sticky note inside of like, like maybe the dot of the eye has another sticky note on it. You zoom in there, and there's like a whole other piece of text. And without scale, you could probably still do that by like setting the size to be like zero point 0.1 pixels and setting the font size of text to be like zero point 0.1 pixels or something. So it's possible to do this without size, but it's kind of I mean without scale. It's kind of a helper property that lets you take existing things and just rescale them.
Mhm.
In practice, like most things can be specified without scale. Um, and like when I make models, I try to not include any scale, and then I leave scaling to like the end user app. But like if the user wants something to be twice as big as the included, they could just set the scale to 2. But like in terms of being able to serialize such data into an interchange format, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
So is scale then a factor, and the default scale factor is just 1, and larger numbers
Correct.
enlarge it? So okay.
The default is 1.
Okay, because we had 0 in one spec somewhere, and that
Yeah.
confused me even more.
Well, to
Okay.
be more specific, it's a 1 vector. So the default scale would be like 1 1 or 1 1 1.
Okay.
Oh, you can scale
So
arbitrarily, and yeah.
okay, yeah, that does make sense to me.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, what's the default for our? So
One
it's one
thing
one one.
I'll note again, as just another note here, is that having the scale be different numbers, like not all the same number through the dimensions, actually causes the the transform of the object to become what's called non-conformal, which means that it could look distorted and such. So you usually want scale to be uniform, but all the tools that I've ever seen let you change these numbers independently.
Mhm. It makes sense. Um, hmm.
We can always move stuff to extensions, but we can also keep them here. If and another question about size, if size is optional and I'm about to display something, how do I know the size?
And is size primarily used for the hitbox, like making it easier to calculate the hitbox? Because you already have position and
Let's say a loaded PNG. It
yeah,
has pixels defined, and we work in pixels, so I know exactly how large it is in pixels. That's easy. But
yep.
what if I open an SVG?
Hmm.
An SVG, I think, can define a view box to define the size, but doesn't have to. So then
Uh-huh.
the size is sort of undefined. And if we didn't define the size here, then it's hard to scale something if no first size is known at all. So maybe
Right.
size is optional if the content clearly defines it, sort of.
Yeah, it feels like size of all of these things I've been sitting here looking at size and going, that's the one that feels the most related to the resource,
Yeah,
right? It's like that uh like if you have a just an arbitrary triangle shape or some sort of arbitrary polygon, right? It's going to have size, but not in a strict XY sense, unless you were trying to, draw a square or a quadrilateral around that contains the entire thing. Um, why have it at the top level at all?
There's also the question of like if you have an image that's 100 pixels wide and you have a size that's 200 pixels wide, that should
Right.
like display the image at like twice the size.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Also,
you
in the
could
terms of
use
having it like
scale
at the
it.
top level at all, another benefit of having it here is that
Yeah.
if the resource can't be loaded for some reason, we could still like know what size the thing is. And that could be
Yeah.
useful for like positioning things relative to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the size is really useful. I would. It's almost as important as position. I mean, a
Yeah.
basic building block of a canvas is probably a rectangle of content, and a rectangle needs position and size.
Mm-hmm. But I'm just
So
wondering if everything is going to have a position, like everything's going to have different types of size information at the resource level well, I guess we'll see as we get down into it. Um,
well, in the end, we need some kind of size. I mean, if you have just a text document and you have it at this position in the open canvas, you don't know how to word wrap it. I mean, how long do you want to have it? If there's no size information, it's just undefined.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I can see why,
So,
like I said, I think everything is going to have a size. The question is whether it's going to be at the resource level and it's going to have a specific meaning. Well, yeah, as long as it's optional.
that's, yeah, to have size at the resource level is actually a freaky idea. Maybe.
Maybe child nodes don't have size.
What don't have size?
Child nodes or nodes that are
Child nodes.
nested, that their size is restricted by the size of the parent.
Mm-hmm.
So if the size is optional, we need to like define what is the default size. Would it make sense to have the default size be like -1, and then if the size is negative, then like see the resource for the size or something?
Hmm.
Mhm. We need to look whether different. Let's maybe jump to resources now. That makes sense. We're mostly done here,
Mm-hmm.
and let's talk about resources. So we have two kinds of assets: resources and schemas, and they are managed using similar mechanisms:
Mm-hmm.
inline, external, and remote. If it's inline, we refer to it by ID. So we need unique IDs for resources. If it's remote, we just can use a URI. And if it's external, maybe we can use other names. Then we use a relative URI to point to a local file. So a resource. A resource has multiple representations, and each resource representation, the ID actually needs to go to the resource level. I meant this wrong. So each resource has an ID, but the representations themselves have no ID because they all belong to the same resource. They are different ways to render the same resource. But in order to understand them, we need to define the type, the MIME type. We could have the actual content stored inline for a resource, or we could refer to them as at a location, which is then either a local path or a full URI. So content or location must be present. The MIME types are as defined by IANA. Content is just an inline string. I haven't defined yet how to handle binary content, or how to, maybe it can just be base 64 encoded. Location, yeah, that's fine. And then we have data URIs. They are nice. So if you put location and then a data URI, then the MIME type and the content are actually implied. So this would be the most concise notation, just have location and a data URI. In all other cases, you actually need to state the MIME type in order to interpret the stuff at content and location. But if location is a remote URI and it serves a content header, then you can use that as the MIME type and can omit it here. So it's
Flexible.
Yeah. And this is how fallbacks work. Here comes an example for fallbacks. So here's a resource R1 with 3 representations, a locally defined SVG image. But if our client doesn't know how to handle SVG, we just load the remote PNG. But if we are also offline, we just display the third fallback or third representation, which is just a string.
That's
So
elegant.
this is
like
how
that.
it would work.
Yeah.
Very cool. And is that array presented in priority order in terms of
Yes.
representation?
Yes.
Okay. Did you say that
Yes.
somewhere and I missed it?
Yeah, good question. I think I did. The order of representations is significant.
Great. Yeah. Captured. This is great. And that, like you said,
Well,
later representations can be used as fallbacks. It's cool.
yeah. So yeah, this is how representations work. So if you want to display hello world, you need at least one entry in the resource area with at least one representation. And we also talked about like shorthands. So to maybe allow a property content on the node with the implication of but it gets complicated. Of a non-referenceable anonymous resource.
Like an anonymous function. I mean, we have them in programming.
Yeah, we can add that if required. It would. Yeah, maybe we should. Okay, so we talked about visual nodes, and that's fine for now. We talked about assets. Let's talk about schemas for a second. So we use schemas in two ways. One schema to define the OK format itself, and then for defining the contents of extensions. We can store them either inline in the schemas property or externally. And we always need to be able to know the version of a schema. So given any two schema references in our system, must be trivial to determine if they are equal. So this needs to go to design decisions. So what is an entry in the schemas array? Each schema has a URI, and that is required. The URI is like the ID of the schema. URIs just work really well for schema IDs. And this URI also contains the version information. And then we have three more properties which are optional depending on the context. The actual schema, you just define then inline as a JSON object, the actual schema, or you define the location for a schema. So one of these two must be present. No, it doesn't have to. If the URI resolves to a valid schema, you can leave out the location. Yeah. And you can assign a name. And now name is what makes it really smooth, because you can, in the schemas array, define a bunch of schemas and give them nice local names, and then use these names, because the URIs are ugly, use these local names for extensions.
Wait, say that again. Use local names for extensions.
Yeah, I will show an example how this is going to be used. So just to summarize, we have like three kinds of schemas: define it just inline, define it externally, or define it remote, just like with the resources. So in the schemas array, we can, for example, have if ports were an extension, I haven't added ports yet to the spec, then we would define list URI refers to the short name at OCWG ports. And then in some nodes array, we can just say data. In the data array, we can say type is OCWG ports, and that's it. We have a ports extension. Or we define another user supplied extension for circles, and then refer to it by its group ID and local name, and have that.
Interesting. So instead of having like a centralized name server, we're relying on the system to export non-conflicting schema names locally.
Yeah, so the real schema in use is always defined by URI, which is a global namespace. And locally, we can use any kind of abbreviated strings just to make the file more readable.
No, I love it. This is the sometimes called pet names system, where like within any individual canvas file, you can have pet names assigned to the different schemas, and those don't conflict because they only need to be locally consistent, and you can compute that across the file. So yeah.
And you can easily upgrade. Let's say there's a new Circle version, Circle 1.1, and it's totally compatible with all your Circle usages. You just add it in your schema array.
Yeah.
And the file is updated.
Very cool.
We could also have some built-in mappings. where we have like the 10 best extensions from OCWG, which are sort of magically always built in, so you can even leave out these stuff for the built-in schemas and just refer to them by name, and they always refer to the same built-in URI as defined by the spec. This probably
Yeah,
makes
sounds
sense.
So
Yeah.
all this leaves me with just one question. If we have name as a property and the name is what we use to refer to the schema, why is that not a key in an object? Like have it be a dictionary?
Yeah, that's is another discussion we had long time ago, how in general we use dictionaries and arrays, and it's a bit a conflicting thing. You can, if you use this as a key, then JSON enforces key uniqueness already. But if you're a programmer and you have such an object in your hand, then you can no longer see what the name is because that is outside of that JSON object. So for debugging, this version is actually quite nice in practice.
I see.
And
Well, to be honest, that import time you can create like your own objects in memory that both have a map of keys to values and also have the name inside of it. So like
You could
it
reformat it on load. Yeah.
yeah, I think either way works fine. The only thing though is that in the structure of the data, the fact that you have name as a field gives to me the indication that it's potentially not unique or potentially not meant to be used as an identifier. Like, can you refer to schemas by index? Say like index, like schema number 3 in the file. Is that valid or is it not valid?
no, no. So yeah, I mean, I remember that I created an earlier version for nodes and referred to them by keys. And then we decided to abandon it. But this is certainly also quite concise. So
It's very concise. Yeah.
The only thing is, wouldn't
Yeah.
this is wrong actually
those be
because
objects? Because they can have more
yeah,
than just URI, right?
yeah, this is actually wrong for the moment. If we also have a location which might be required, then we need more. Yeah. But Copilot was not smart enough to infer that. Yeah, actually, I have no strong opinion for either direction.
Neither. Same.
Yeah, for schemas, this looks fine, but I think for nodes, you still want a list or an array instead of a dictionary.
Then
Agreed. Yeah.
why?
Yeah, because yeah, why? You can also yeah, approach it differently from code, of course, because you can easily walk through a dictionary
Mhm.
and to an array, but somehow it looks the structure of nodes looks more like a list to me, something that you walk through and put on the screen depending on the properties.
GLTF has nodes being an array, but the difference is that GLTF refers to nodes by index, not by
Right.
name or ID.
Or ID. Yeah.
We use IDs to make it more hacker friendly and to make concatenation of two files manually easier.
I
Mhm.
completely agree with that because there's a big problem in the GLTF ecosystem where people want to like compose files together. You just can't. You have to like reinterpret all the data and rewrite all the IDs.
Yeah, I still think you need an ID for the nodes, even though it could be a list, how it's stored in the file, but yeah, it can be both.
You want to talk about extensions?
Yeah. Extensions. So extension is any JSON object or any JSON object can can be used as a data bag holder, property bag holder for data, but it has to have one property called type. So type is a reserved property key. And that defines the type of the extension. And type, I haven't listed this yet, type needs to refer to a name property or URI. Yeah, type or simple name. And the rest is just blah, blah. Yeah. And you can easily distinguish if it starts with an @ sign, it's a local name defined in the schema array. And if it's a URI,
Why
it's
have
just defined.
why have both the schema array and the? Oh, I guess so that you can, like you said, just make a change.
Reuse. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. I got it. Okay.
So URI is a kind of shorthand. So name is like the default. No, actually URIs, yeah, both is kind of a base case. Okay, then I wrote that extensions, that applications should not throw away extension data. And we have a sample extension, like how should extensions be documented? They need to have a schema. They should have a name. They need to define their properties. And then the semantics, for example, the circle extension, which provides a radius, implies a size property. If you have a radius, we imply the size of the box. So this is how such an extension is used. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So this looks nice. Then let's look at
And so
the relations.
do you have an example of the circle extension within the context of the resource that it belongs to?
No, not yet.
Okay. I would definitely like, yeah, the fuller example of like an extension within a resource.
Yeah.
And then another question would be, can a resource have multiple extensions? I think the
Yeah,
answer
of
is
course.
yes. Yeah. Okay.
We listed that.
And then how do the properties, are we going to prefix the properties underneath? Like, I guess we're not
No.
going to. They can conflict, and then I'll basically the consumer of the canvas has to decide what to do with it.
The names cannot conflict because we put each extension in its own object.
Right. Yeah, I just meant two extensions could have the same set of names. They won't conflict in the file, but it'll be up to the consumer of the canvas, whoever's reading it, to decide how to resolve that conflict. The fact.
Yeah, but even the same name might imply conflicting information or not. I mean, it's yeah, it gets really complicated how these extensions play together.
This looks good.
Yeah, extensions should define how the base properties play together with extension properties. And with other known extensions. Yeah, this is tough. And our structural relations, they go to a similar direction.
Max, while we're here, you might make a note to include an example of multiple extensions as well.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that Orion and I played around with very early on was arrow, just because
arrows.
There's kind of an easy, there's like a base case for arrow, so we should probably have an OCWG arrow. but then almost every canvas does something slightly different with arrows, which implies that there should probably be extensions that handle those different cases. So that could be a good example to include in the documentation.
Even go as far to have two conflicting arrows on the same node?
You
Maybe
could.
that.
I mean, even if you just had an example that had OCWG arrow and either TL draw arrow or Excala draw arrow or some other arrow, and just had
that's good.
kind of a base extension or whatever, and then one extension of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we are almost out of time, but let's look quickly on relations, and then we have seen it all. So relations must have an ID so that we can refer to it. It's the same ID space as for visual nodes, so that they can refer to each other in a non-conflicting way. Then we have to define a type. And this actually refers to a type defined in the schema section, right? And then we have the actual, we can have additional data like we can for visual nodes. And currently the JSON schema, which is checked in, uses the word name. And I would suggest to use type.
Makes sense to me. When you say JSON schema currently uses name, what do you mean
No,
by that?
our JSON schema, which I think Michael did in order to have something working.
Yeah, could be. I think type is better.
All right. Yeah, and then I added to sort of from the current JSON schema which we use. We have two relations. They need some kind of URI. They need a name. Then, for example, the set relation has just a members array, which is a list of node or resource IDs. This is how it would be used. Then we have an edge from two, very simple edge. And yeah, this is more or less it. We can quickly look for open issues which we haven't talked about. This is fine. Talked about that one. And we need to spend more time on the exact semantics of the relations, like parent, child, group. We have quite some good notes from former meetings.
Yeah.
This is all fine. Yeah, yeah, maybe these general ideas in the bottom. Yeah, like what is the proposed file extensions for OCF files on disk? I often like these double file extensions, so .ocif, .json, that would always open JSON editors. And then if you have a really smart editor, it could see, it's actually an OCF file and do something with that information. But maybe it's also ugly and you prefer to drop the OCF part. Any
I like all of the
opinions on
above.
this?
I like the double file extension, but also I completely understand if people want to go with a single file extension.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, so
OCF.json is fine. I think also .ocif is fine too. If like we could allow for either, but it's going to be up to, but obviously it's going to be valid JSON. So I think having it be a .json so that it opens a JSON editor makes a lot of sense. I don't like it being .json because it's not just JSON. It's structured. It's JSON with a very specific schema.
all right. And then, if we serve OCIF files over the web, we need to serve it with some content type and
We might
probably
want
application.
to reserve some name with IANA once the format is actually developed and we have something to show. We can like tell them like, hey, we're using this file for MIME type. Can we get it reserved for us?
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this would be the obvious MIME type we should strive for. Application OCIF plus JSON. That's how all the other JSON enhanced formats do it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, and then about all these namespaces, where do we serve all our specs from? I mean, we need some kind of root namespace, so it's like spec, or I prefer OCIF because it tells us a bit more. And then, yeah, the version. And then that should probably serve, yeah, maybe via content negotiation, either a JSON file or the Markdown file or HTML file later on.
I'm not sure if are you intentionally including the www in front of .canvas protocol, or is that just for grins?
No,
It could be shorter. If we're going to do it at the root of the domain,
yes,
then
it's fine. So this would then be a redirect either to a JSON file or to, yeah, I don't know, spec. Is it HTTP or is it HTTPS? I mean, normally on the web you use HTTPS nowadays, but for these namespace files, I'm not sure what the consensus is.
I don't know that it will really matter, and except for local development, I think is the place where we'll run into like
If you
annoying.
see HTTP in like in some kind of URI like that, it might just be there for the sake of keeping it the same as like the old way of doing it, so that it's persistent across time. But like for newer things, HTTPS I think is recommended.
All right.
Yeah.
Then we keep it this way. And then
Agreed.
how do we serve our extensions? So if we have like a nodes extensions, so we serve it at this URI, or is it too conflicting with this 1.0? Should we then add a spec in between to have it less conflicting with the nodes, or should we have an X for extensions? So it implies a website structure. So
but it's also the readability of the, like, this is what will be in the schema array, or the schema map if we choose to use a dictionary. Yeah. Another option would be using a subdomain for all of the serving up all of the specifications. Then the canvasprotocol.org main thing becomes exactly. So you have spec.canvasprotocol.org, which implies the OCIF as well, right? Like you don't even need the OCIF, I don't think. It's just 1.0. That's the spec.
Okay. Then how you distinguish between the nodes extension? Just
I think
like
it's
this.
Yeah, I think so. No, that's
so the ports extension for nodes. We need to distinguish the types for node extensions from the relation extensions.
Yes, I gotcha. I would probably use like n/ and r/ like as the very first thing. Exactly. Keeps it really short and like makes it clear that it's a node versus a relation, and doesn't, that way that those two namespaces don't conflict. Yeah. So then I guess some other things that are implied here is that if people, like, these are the sort of OCWG blessed nodes and relations that are part of the core spec for now. Do we want to offer some sort of community server as well that allows that people who don't have a domain or don't want to set up and maintain a public domain for their spec, for their extension, can use. And should that be separate from spec.canvasprotocol.org, or should it just be part of
Well,
spec?
if it's not separate, then you sort of imply blessing, and that requires moderation, and
Yeah.
that hinders the idea of a community server in the first place. So
So
at
maybe
least
having a community server then? Like
if
community.canvas protocol or something like that, or extensions, ext or exts or whatever.
community is nice, actually, it's more friendly than extension.
It's true.
That's clear.
Because technically those are all extensions, right? Like the core
Yeah.
ones are extensions as well.
Yeah, and maybe a last remark. I think the name relation is a bit weird.
Mm.
I don't know. I have something like structure in mind.
Structure.
Yeah, it's more. I mean, we have sets, we have edges, we have B edges.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the relation with parent and child, a common word to describe all that is hierarchy. I don't know if that's something we want to use or not, but throwing it out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think I have an opinion, but I hear what you're saying, Max, that relation does feel a little strange and structure does feel more general. And what we're trying to say is that the visual information on the screen has some sort of logical structure to it. So calling it structure or structured is structures weird, like pluralizing it, making it plural, as opposed
It
to
works for me as a non-native speaker.
I
yeah,
think it is a little bit weird because we typically think about everything together as part of one structure.
right.
Like,
And structures commonly in English, like the vernacular would refer to buildings, like um, multiple buildings, multiple structures, built structures. Um, it's interesting. Yeah. I'm ambivalent about changing it or not. I think that the relation stuff is already somewhat abstract for people as opposed to concrete. And so using a word like relation that it sort of just leans into the natural abstractions, the abstract nature of that structure that we're talking about. So I don't know.
I think relations is honestly a good word, even if it's not exactly like precisely what we're trying to convey. It's still better to not use a word that's too general. Like, I don't know, we have like the word parent and child, but like these nodes didn't give birth to each other. So like the words are not going to be entirely accurate all the time.
Right. Yep. And yeah,
All
we're
right.
even using from and to be more specific, right?
All
Than
right.
parent
So
child.
we keep relations. Fine then.
I think keep it. Yeah.
Um, so spec, community, N and R. Yeah, that's fine as the next iteration. All right. I think we have all the small issues resolved,
Mm-hmm.
and I can try to push this. Actually, should we keep putting this into the same pull request, or just have a branch in GitHub where we change stuff and keep committing stuff?
I mean, I think we're at the point where what you have now needs to end up on main. How it gets
Yeah.
there is really, I'm ambivalent about it. I'm tired of working on like, not tired of. I think we're past the point of working on a separate branch um where we're continually iterating. I think that this could land at main and then we iterate from there. And unless
Yeah,
other people feel like we should continue to work off of a branch for a
I
while.
agree.
I wouldn't put it on main yet.
Right. Maybe not
But
today. but I think what you're working on should end up on main soon. With
Yeah.
like once you have your edits in there, and we can even, we'll indicate, it's 0.1, like all that kind of stuff. Or maybe this is 0.2 at this point, whatever. We're iterating towards 1.0. We're not there yet, but we're.
Ah, yeah, in the beginning I said what we have or today on the webpage or in the pull request, I call it 0.1, and to distinguish it, this one is 0.2, just to have some numbers attached.
Yeah, actually that would be a good thing. We could close the current PR as 0.1, open a new PR, and then have you merge in the stuff under 0.2. That would make a cleaner history as well.
Yeah, that's maybe sort of what happened.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Great work, Max. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Awesome.
What kind of additional feedback would you like, or do you want, or support in kind of getting this over the line?
I think just small questions like today will come up when I go over it again. So, but I can just put them in as issues. That worked fine. So I think I can prepare the next iteration.
Very cool. All right.
Do you have something in mind that needs to be added? Like ports, for example, are something we decided upon, which is certainly missing.
Yeah. But we had talked about making that an extension, right? If I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I forgot whether we decided to have it in extension or core. I
Yeah,
can
not sure.
craft either way.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yeah, groups are really important. Then the parent-child stuff and inheritance.
I'm reading back through our transcript where we talked about ports in meeting 12. Yeah.
And what about the place for additional information that not can be put somewhere else? That maybe some specific canvases need.
Ah, like
Mm.
top level
And
extensions to
yeah,
they are not which.
for example,
Ah,
what I'm thinking about for my own tool that I'm working on is to store history execution state or something like that in the JSON file itself for reproducing debugging information that you want to store with the visual programming system
mm-hmm.
to replicate it later. But it's really specific, of course. But I can imagine for other tools there
Yeah,
can
Max,
be.
that feels like a perfect example of something that should probably be an issue that we add
Yeah.
after merging this in. It's like extensions to the core could be useful, but right now, technically, Michael could add those as invisible nodes.
Yeah,
Have extensions. There's a workaround there.
yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, Max, if you have
Yeah,
questions.
one other idea. I think we should. Where do I have it? We should, as an example, take an application like Excalidraw, which is really, I don't have it in here. Excalidraw is really well documented. For all their properties, they have a huge table and define exactly what they do. And we could sort of translate it. So if you want to model Excalidraw as OCIF, so these properties would be modeled in this way, this would go in this way, so that this spec is easier to understand, sort of as a running example or whatever.
Yep. Running code overthrows kind of thing.
But
Yeah.
is Excalidraw the best example, or should I mean,
Scaladraw or TLDraw are the two that I'm most familiar with these days.
is TLDraw publicly documented in the
Mhm.
in the structure?
Yeah.
So I don't mind which one to take. Maybe the simpler one.
I think TLDraw is simpler. Excalidraw is a little older, and I think TLDraw actually learned from some of the things
Okay.
that that Excalidraw did. TLDraw learned from some of the things that Excalidraw did. And from what I've heard from people who've worked on both, the underlying data model for TLDraw is a little cleaner than Excalidraw. Like the Excalidraw one
Okay.
is pretty complicated in certain spots.
Okay. So then, yeah.
But I think either one of those would be good to take on. And yeah, that the first piece of code that we've talked about writing that could be helpful would be the translation back and forth between Excalidraw and TLDraw, since they are so similar to each other, and people are frequently familiar with both but prefer one of them. That would be kind of one of the first things to write, is a converter tool. Technically, it would be the start of a large set of converter tools, that like OCIF to TLDraw, TLDraw to OCIF, OCIF to Excalidraw, Excalidraw to OCIF, and then now you have, real interchange because you just add another thing, and you're off to the races.
All right. Yeah.
Max, would it be helpful to have feedback from someone else who's familiar with specs? Like, I was thinking of, we've talked about talking to Brooklyn Zelinka, and I don't know if you'd want to, I could make an introduction between the two of us. I could also invite her to our next meeting. I could just send it to her async and see if she has any feedback on it. But I guess the probably the first step here is get it merged in first, or at least get a PR set up where you're ready to merge, where you feel like
Yeah.
the things have been resolved.
Yeah. I just need to go over it again for some hours and then
Cool.
put it in. And yeah, hopefully in 2 weeks we can discuss it.
Great.
I mean,
Exciting.
today was a really great work session. We actually did work.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All right.
Good.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. I'll stop the recording.